Eva.
Thank you, everybody. Welcome to today's council meeting, a special meeting to discuss decisions around local water done well. We have had the council prayer this morning with the assets meeting. We have an apology from Councillor Jill Duncan. Would somebody please like to receive that apology? Thank you, Councillor Carter, Councillor Sharlin. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. We have online Councillors Lambert and Councillors Dalgety. Can you hear us all right? And I understand, Councillor Dalgety, you may have some comms issues. If you drop out, we'll take that as an apology, please. I have no public forum. Conflict of interest? No, none. Thank you. Confirmation of order of business in terms of the recommendations, and I'll explain why later. Recommendation 4, I will take after recommendation 7, just because it makes sense in terms of what other decisions we could make. In terms of confirmation of the minutes, I'm looking for alterations and corrections, starting pages 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Would then somebody like to please move receipt of those? Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Thank you, Councillor Rakawa. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Carried. We then move to the main item of the day. And this is local water done well, the deliberations on submissions on council's consultation document and proposed model for delivering council's water services. I would like to make a couple of comments, and some of them are highlighted in my introductory comments. First of all, I would like to thank staff. The process to get to this stage has been exhaustive. It's been exhaustive for councillors, it's been exhaustive for staff, and it has been a moving feast. We have had a number of changes that have been made via government, etc., by various meetings over the last, even down to the last 10 days. I'd also like to thank those people who submitted. This is probably the most significant decision that council will make for a very, very long time. As such, I'd just like to read the first piece for those online. Since the consultation paper was put out, we've been made aware of a number of directions from the Department of Internal Affairs / Government and a greater understanding of local water done well, its principles and how it will be enacted. This addition to the report also serves as an apology to the consultation process that we were not aware of these things at the time of going to print, but think that it is essential for councillors to bear these things in mind when making determinations. And I've listed a series of those. For those online, to give you some idea of this, I think over a 10-day period, there were 7 meetings with regard to local water done well by either the groups of mayors, councillors attending meetings, and probably several more with regards to staff. That is the reality of the world we're operating in. Because of the significance of today's decisions, I'm also looking as chair to setting aside standing orders with respect to the decision-making process. So standing orders say that when somebody has moved and seconded, there can be 3 speakers in favour and 3 speakers against, and then the motion must be put. I think that this is of what merits each councillor being able to have a say. But I prefer, please, that you have one say, that we're not going to go around the table several different times. We will take each section by section, but at this stage, I'd like to move to the Chief Executive, Carol, whether you have anything to say.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I think it's more for me to echo your words around the complexity of what we're dealing with today. In the last probably 6 to 7 weeks, we have had numerous meetings, and at each one of those we learn more information. And I think that's what's made this incredibly complex. So I feel for the public, some of the information that if we knew now, we would have put out differently in our consultation document to try and explain it more, but we had what we had at the time, and we're working with that now. So I think a couple of messages for me is, going forward, what I'm keen to make sure we have is a good relationship with who we're going to work with. That's based on trust, and that we can have that working relationship together. And an outcome that gives us certainty. As staff, it's hard to pivot and try and cover all options, but what we would like today is hopefully to get to a stage that you give us certainty of where you want to go to. We've got a number of people in the room. Brent and Michael have been working really closely on the transition with the transition team on this. We will defer probably to both of them for some of their expertise and some of the more minute issues. And Michael has done an excellent job in actually collating and forming all the analysis on the submissions. So I'd just like to thank both of those two as well. But happy to go through the paper in that sense.
Thank you. Just before I take any questions around my introductory comments and any clarification you want there and or correction from staff, I would highlight 5 that at the time of consultation on the entities or going it alone considerations, the possibility of a wider entity, including Palmerston North and Horowhenua, was not being a possibility to those councils. That position has changed with Palmerston North and Horowhenua both interested in a wider discussion, consideration, in fact, inviting us to play in their field. I'll take any questions or clarifications or corrections around my introductory comments first. Thank you. My comments were not designed to lead, they were designed to inform people. Councillor Loudon, do you have a question?
I'll later on. Yeah, thank you.
Under section 1, the reason for the report, are there any questions associated with it, or does staff want to take us through that section?
I'll just make another observation. So under 1.1, the water service delivery plan is due no later than the 3rd of September. There had been discussion about whether that date could be pushed out, and we've had strong direction from DIA, directly from the Minister, that that would not be looked at favourably. So I suggest we try and make sure we actually meet that deadline.
Yes, there was a suggestion from DIA that if you were involved in a regional entity, they would have a lighter look at the delivery plan while expecting further clarification within the first 6 months. That was a comment that was made, but the rules are the rules. That's what we have to go by.
That's right. And I think the uncertainty around Bill 3 is something on top of all of our minds. We are expecting that in mid-June. Yes, so we're hoping that it might provide some clarity in areas that we still have a bit of uncertainty around, and stormwater is one of those. So as we read this, there may be things we can't answer that we know are coming in Bill 3. I'll leave section 1 there.
Yes, absolutely. A comment from me here that the whole complexity of what we're deciding is subject to the decision by government around Bill 3. Take any questions around section 1? Right. Section 2. This is the section around the context for the decision. Staff, are there any comments that you wish to make there, please?
Just, I suppose it's a comment about the overall paper. So the overall paper has really been written when we were strongly considering just the option of the 3 council approach. So that's, you might see gaps in what's actually in the paper and then what's following in the subsequent recommendations. That's because the discussion with Palmerston North and Horowhenua only happened very late in the piece, and this paper had basically been put together. So you might feel like there's a disconnect. The other one I want to comment on is iwi. So we have an excellent relationship with our Tūrupu Ahika committee, and we have been bringing information through to them. We also have regular fortnightly meetings with Ngā Wairehi Ngāti Apa, and I have been keeping them involved right throughout this process. We are planning a hui early June with all those parties as well, and whichever way council goes today, we will still go ahead with that hui.
Yes, the only thing I'd like to add to that is that when local water done well legislation was first proposed, all of the regions councils met together quite frequently, looking at options before there was effectively a potential east-west split within the Horizons region. So we are aware of the discussions that have been happening between Palmerston North and Horowhenua, and it's not a complete surprise to us. Any questions around this section? Thank you. In terms of section 3, this is the high level analysis of submissions received. I understand, Mr. Hodder, you have prepared this report through the Chief Executive. Do you wish to make any comments before I ask all for questions?
No, I've got no comment. I think it just the number of submissions was 90, which is actually a good number compared. Ruapehu got 30 odd, and Whanganui got a bit over 200. So there was an interest that came from the district. The other thing I would observe, this was simply because people were asked to score. This is really just taking those scores and giving you a sense of what it means. One of the things which I noticed as time went by was that the scores, the range between the scores narrowed. At the beginning, there was a much wider gap between the 3 models. By the time it came to the end, they're still some distance apart, but they're not as extreme as they were in the first week or so in that film way. So what it shows you is that there was an interest in collaborating with other councils, and the 3 council model being the the one that council proposed, the consultation document, was the one that was seen as the preferable model, but there was still interest in the other two.
Thank you. Any further comment around the next section, which is aligned so closely, number 4? You might expect the two major considerations for most submitters was scale and efficiency. In other words, could you get some benefit by going bigger, or would you not get benefit going bigger? And then there was the other question was around local voice, local control. What would happen to Rangata's voice in collaborating with others? And some saw that as being quite important, some less important. And one of the factors around that is the new reality that we are moving into, irrespective of the model that council adopts, and that is the presence of the Commerce Commission as the economic regulator. And it's this, the Chief Executive alluded to how this has been a changing environment. Over the last month or so, there's been greater clarity as to what that role is going to mean, even for councils that decide to keep the arrangements in-house. But it does mean, if, as one person described it, the Commerce Commission is the referee. And you might recall that referees determine whether you get a goal or not. They're the ones who judge. And this is quite different from the relationship that councils have had with the audit in doing audit. This is a much more interventionist arrangement. So I think that was something which probably was not so clear in the consultation document because we weren't aware of the performance of this. So I think it's important for elected members to be aware of that other perspective as you think about what was the problem that those who were concerned about local voice, how that might be addressed. I'll take any questions or comments with regard to 3 and 4, which are really related to submissions by theme or submissions per se. Councillor Loughton.
Question for Michael, if I may. The information given in the consultation document, was that with the view of the new information that's been received recently, and I wasn't here for that, unfortunately, so I'm not fully aware of all that new information. The information that was given to submitters in the consultation document, is that quite different to what the new information that we've now received, and could that shape the result of the consultation?
Through you, I think not. It's normal, and it's, if you look at what's been happening in other councils, that when you start to bring organisations together, there's always a question of, well, what happens to our voice, our concern, and immediately people think, well, we won't have a same sort of say. It's a quite normal reaction. And there was an attempt in the consultation document to indicate the presence of the Shareholders' Council, where the councils would have a representative and its role. So that part's perfectly valid. All I was trying to say was that people would not have been aware of the Commerce Commission's role. It doesn't change in any respect the potential for the Shareholders Council to reflect the views of the councils, and to the board. That doesn't change at all. So in that sense, the consultation document was there's an accurate representation of what was essentially going to be mechanics within the CCO, how it operates.
I'll comment further with regard to that, Mr. Hodder. So effectively, with the information that's come to light, we and the submitters were relatively unaware of the complexities, for example, of going it alone. So the need to ring fence finances, even if you were going alone, were available in September, but not widely understood. So if you elected to go it alone or business as usual, you still had a requirement to set up an entity within council that was totally ring fenced. And the regulators and the Commerce Commission would have a say in understanding how that would operate, and from a regulatory point of view. It also moved, for instance, some of the responsibility in terms of liability onto the council members in much the same way that the public liability is passed to the directors of an entity of a regional CCO. So there would have been personal liability moved on to councillors.
I suppose if I can just add to that, I think the information was always there. It was just, we got a better understanding of it when some of the questions were asked at some of these meetings. So there was nothing new. It was new to us because we probably hadn't had it explained in that way previously.
Any further questions or statements? Councillor Rakawa.
Thank you, Mandy. Just based on what you just said, if we did a standalone, you'd create an entity within council.
Right.
Liability would still be on councillors, not on the entity that you created if we were to do what you just said.
You'd effectively be seen as directors within a ring-fenced position within council.
Got it.
Perhaps, if I may, Your Worship, can I also add that an example of new information, and this came after the consultation phase, was what's referenced here in section 4 by Mr. Hodder, which is around the local government funding agency. Have only recently, so within the last month or so, released their definition of how they would basically the cost of debt for the size of entity based around scale, and there's a reference here in the table to the number of connections whereby a entity having, or a joint water services CCO having more than 50,000 connections benefits in the way of a what's called funds from operations to debt ratio. So it has a material benefit to everyone that's part of that organisation or the customers of that organisation, versus the smaller brackets, which is shown there as the 20 to 50,000, which is where the 3 council model for Whanganui, Ruapehu and Rangitikei currently sits. So that's relatively new information, and we also had the representative from LGFA speak at a workshop only last Friday and clarify those matters. Thank you.
Thank you. On Councillor,
Just a comment going it alone and liabilities for councillors. We have election coming up, and so there may be people voting that might not be standing in the next election, and the people coming on might all of a sudden have a liability. Thought about and considered.
the case of buyer beware. In this case, you take on that responsibility standing for council if that was the case. But interesting position. Councillor Sharlin.
There was also, when I was reading it, there's a very, if you go it alone, the Commerce Commission is going to investigate you a lot more and have a lot more accountability as well.
Yes, the Commerce Commission effectively said exactly that if you elect to go into a regional entity, then we will take a fairly light look at you initially, but if you elect to go it alone, you'll be under full scrutiny. Councillor Moore.
That's not necessarily a bad thing either.
No.
You know,
Accept that.
ratepayers and
keep paying the water rates if you're under the spotlight and.
Absolutely accept that. I'll move to 5. These are with regard to other matters. I have a couple of comments that I'd like to make for those people online because they are significant in my opinion. Under 5.8, price harmonisation. So it needs to be very clear that the government is not signalling that price harmonisation will occur by way of the bill. So they are silent on this, and effectively they're leaving that discussion to between the governance board in terms of strategy and the entity to decide who will set those provisions. Harmonisation, for those online, is where everybody pays a similar rate for wastewater and water, irrespective of where you live. The feeling that I get is that price harmonisation across different districts will not happen immediately, but may be considered later. But harmonisation within a district, for instance, if we went into a relationship with other councils in the regional CCO, I'm reasonably convinced that we could have harmonisation of price within our district, but probably not harmonisation across districts. In other words, Palmerston, Horowhenua or Wanganui would be not subsidising our district, nor would we be subsidising potentially their districts. But it is a moving feast with regard to that. The second one I'd highlight is under 5.11, the metering of water. So the Minister has given recently a signal that his expectation is that metering should occur within about 5 years. Any clarification further around these points of interest from staff?
Just the price harmonisation one, I think the message again on Friday from the DIA was that is something that comes after you've worked out who you are going to work with, and you shouldn't let that interfere or drive your decision now. It's certainly something that can be looked at in future, and it should be, but it shouldn't be done, and it shouldn't be dependent on who you go with. That comes after.
Yeah, the highlights is going to be when you get to the next stage in terms of forming relationships, the discussions on the setup of the governance board and the role of the governance board in setting overall strategy and pricing will be a series of complex discussions. Take any questions, any comment from councillors with regard to 5. Excuse me. No. Thank you. I move to 6, the informal community engagement during the consultation process. Who would like to speak to that? The staff member? It's really just highlighting what has happened.
I think everything's laid out in the report, Your Worship.
Any questions relating to that? I will just make a comment. Some of our meetings were very poorly attended, and I can sort of understand it. The community feels as though this issue of 3 waters, local water done well, has been around for some time, and the message is just get on with it and make a decision. It is a crucial decision, but that's the turnout we have to accept has not been high, not for want of trying. Anything else? Otherwise I'll move back to 7. 7, the feedback from submissions to Ruapehu and Wanganui District Council's consultations. Any further comment there?
I just wonder if it's worth knowing, Ruape who had their meeting yesterday, would this be an appropriate?
Yes.
So, they did meet, with their council yesterday. And I'll just read you out where they landed with, what their decision was. So they confirmed that their council will not progress any work on a standalone delivery option for themselves. The next resolution was they agreed to continue working with Rangitikei and Wanganui councils in establishing a 3-council water services CCO. And they also agreed to progress work on a water services CCO that reaches the 50,000 connection threshold with Palmerston North City and others. And they further resolved to conduct a short engagement from the 28th of May to the 11th of June. And this is because their consultation document only specified a standalone option or the 3-council option. They didn't specify a wider option, so they feel like they should go back and ask their community for a short consultation on that. We're not in that space because we had the wider council option as part of our options that we actually went out with.
So effectively, they're covering their bases here
Yeah.
to be able to be party to potentially a wider grouping or to continue relationships with Wanganui, Ruapehu and ourselves, subject to the consultation process that they're required to go through.
And then they'll reconfirm their decision on the 25th of June.
Anything further from staff, councillors? I would say in this section, one of the difficulties has been that Wanganui District had to change their decision timetable. They had a series of discussions with an iwi sector, and iwi, that sector were not happy that they'd been consulted in a correct manner. And so now Wanganui will not be making a decision until July. That makes timeframes very difficult. So depending on what else happens, who knows where the other councils will land up. The difficulty is, for instance, if you elected to go into a decision with only Wanganui and Ruapehu, and Wanganui then elected to go it alone, effectively Ruapehu and Rangitikei could be left without dance partners. And because of these timing issues.
And just to further to that, the indication we've had from Palmerston North and Horowhenua is they would like our response as soon as practically possible.
And we should, I'm hopeful that we should be in a position today to be able to respond to Wanganui, Ruapehu, Horowhenua and everybody, so this is our position. 8, section 8, the mana whenua implications. Staff, your comment?
I think I made the comment before that, you know, we agreed to undertake our own consultation with Turuku Ahika and Wariki Ngāti Apa, and I think they've appreciated that approach, and we'll continue to do that, and we will bring that hui together in early June.
And we have offered to reach out to any iwi right through to hapu level if requested. As section 9, the rural water supplies. This has been subject to a huge amount of discussion and will be part of recommendations associated with the paper. Any further comment at the moment from staff? Even though it will be addressed as part of a recommendation. No? Questions from staff at this point in terms of that report? What I would say is we've had a series of meetings with especially Erewhon and Huntle Rural Water Supplies. And they have given us an absolute direction to say that they would like to be standalone, that they would like to continue to receive administration and support from this council, but do not wish to be part of a wider regional entity. Something that is permitted, but the mechanism for doing it is still to be worked through. Is that a fair summary of that position, staff?
Yep.
Okay. 10, stormwater, and quite an intriguing and interesting one. Comments from staff. I have some comments to make as well.
Your Worship, this is an area that's, we hope will be clarified in the near future when the Select Committee report comes before the Parliamentary Select Committee on the 17th of June. In respect of Bill 3, there's a lot of ambiguity in the current bill as it is worded around stormwater, including as referenced in the report around what assets may be transferred. And that's basically a confusion between what remains as transport related infrastructure and what is actual stormwater assets that can be transferred to a water entity or water services entity. In addition, there's the question of how it's paid for and charged for. Currently, most councils through rating and the mechanisms to achieve that. So there's, again, it's a little bit like the rural water schemes in a fashion where some clarity is needed, and at the moment sort of all options remain on the table.
I'll reserve my comments until we come to the recommendations, if you like.
Happy to take any questions because it is a little bit more of a complex issue with the association with land use and the way that stormwater ties into so many other activities.
I'll just ask one question. If we were to defer making a decision with regard to the stormwater, what would be the implication of that? Would we be disadvantaged in stepping back a little bit and making that particular recommendation decision later?
Your Worship, in my view, no, provided that that decision is made in sufficient timely manner that whatever the decision, it can be incorporated into the water service delivery plan, which is, as the Chief Executive noted, is required by 3rd of September.
Thank you. Moving to option, sorry, Councillor Louder.
Just the stormwater pipe sitting under the road is transferred. The stormwater pipe bursts and causes a flood. The liability sits where for risk for the community.
Thanks, Councillor. That's the essence of the complexity in effect. Yeah, once the ownership of that asset's clearly defined, then presumably the liability in the situation you describe will sit with the entity that is owning and or maintaining that asset. But stormwater systems by their nature aren't just, as you point out, one pipe. They're a system, they're a series of drainage, which can be an open drain, it can be a private drain through someone's private property that then goes into a pipe that then runs under a road, then becomes part of a stream, for example. So, you know, at what point is it entity's liability? At what point is it someone else's liability? Those matters haven't really been, to my mind, at least clarified clearly yet. And the intent in the legislation, in fact, it's worded in the legislation, is that something called a stormwater network risk management plan will have to be produced, which effectively covers who's going to be liable, who takes the risk over management of the waterways, and particularly quality around the discharge from that stormwater system as well. My own view would be that the water entity, if there is one established, should be well positioned to produce that sort of network risk management plan, irrespective of where the ownership lies. It's something that is going to be required to take a holistic view rather than sort of trying to break it down into little components.
My understanding stand correction. It's when you're referring to a stormwater pipe under a road, if that is in an urban situation, you cannot actually transfer it as part of this bill. Which is a complexity in itself. And with the other assets, they would still at the moment need to be ring fenced by council, are subject to the same interrogation, if you like. The complexities around this probably can be summarised in a September document. I spent quite a bit of time looking at exactly this issue, and probably the most telling one, I will go through it. With regard to, this is a paper produced for the Mayoral Forum in September through DIA. 4.4.1, working with stormwater, working through the approach for each council and how this affects the design of future service delivery arrangements may not be straightforward. The implications of the water organisation setting the cost of delivering services to the expected levels of service risks makes councils effectively price takers. More work is needed to understand the implications of this, which will form part of the development of the Joint Water Service Delivery Plan. It may be that it is an issue for councils wish to address as part of any future submission to the Select Committee and to legislation. So effectively, it is, in my view, been seen as a difficulty that probably won't be addressed in terms of the bill, but hopefully it could be. But it's absolutely highlighted the complexities of it. And one of the reasons for my approach later may be to say, put this on hold, and hence the direction of my question as to whether it would be disadvantaged. Because whoever you go into a relationship with, you probably need to have this discussion with the other members of the entity. And hopefully there'll be more clarification.
Your Worship, if I can just make a comment on this one. I think this is similar to the harmonisation. I think we shouldn't get distracted in the complexities of the details that we can iron out later on. I think there's going to be more clarity on how to deal with it. And we can sit down with our partners and thrash it out. But I think for now, we should just, in principle, agree to move along and we'll negotiate those.
Yeah, I have a slightly different view, but similar approach that can be dealt with later. Therefore, we probably shouldn't make a binding decision on its position.
Just for my worship, for clarity, and for anyone online, you're right in terms of the bill and the implicates for urban stormwater networks. Shouldn't be any impact for rural stormwater networks or stormwater culverts effectively under rural roads aren't part of this.
Yeah. Does that sort of answer your question?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well,
But it is.
could I just add something else in?
Yeah, sure.
When you're talking about transferring these assets over, council has a policy regarding development contribution fees right now that may be usurped by a new CCO in the water space, and they may wish to charge for development. Developing of our town, so that's going to a point to be negotiated within the CCO.
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be on the table for discussion. Absolutely, by the entity. But I think, we're starting to get a little bit buried in detail here. Financial implications. Section 12. Ian, is this you?
I imagine it probably is. Just trying to get to it and bouncing through the different parts of it.
I think the LGFA information is probably the most relevant, Ian, isn't it?
That goes a little bit further. So there's a couple of things there. The cost per connection is in the diagram. I think we've taken councils through that a couple of times now. The change in funding has probably been the biggest change for us. We had it quite clear in our head under the LGFA that if we went into a CCO, we could get 500% on our income, and that has changed. Particularly for the first few years, LGFA will probably look at it differently in about 5 years once everyone's set up. But for here, it's around looking at our gross debt ratios and our funding of income, covering our income with cost of interest with our income has been the big changes for us.
Well, I'd just like to make a point that for those councillors that attended the meeting in Palmerston North, and forgive me, I can't remember the date, it might be 2 weeks ago, and you saw a Mount Everest spike.
Yes.
That we did clarify afterwards that those numbers were not correct. So unfortunately, that might have influenced other councils' opinion of us early on, if they'd been provided those numbers. So Leanne and the team have been working really closely with Morrison Lowe and others to provide the correct information. So I just wanted to make sure that anyone who was at that meeting and was horrified by the look of that graph,
As I was.
that they were incorrect, and now they've been corrected and the appropriate people have been supplied the correct numbers.
Councillor Rakawa.
Thank you. In regards to the 500% that said if we go CCO, we can borrow that. But I remember, hopefully I remember correctly, we were supposed to have an AA rating. Well, but when we don't, do we?
No,
We don't have to.
Oh, we don't have to.
No, it's through the chair. That was for a CCO, not us. And that has changed because the new CCOs won't have time to get their credit ratings from day one for starters. And it will take a little bit of time to transition the assets across, build the income, get that level. So that's why they've gone to a different
Great.
debt model.
So for those online, very quick summary of this, and I stand to be corrected, is first of all, we transfer our assets. If we go into a regional entity, we transfer our assets. Those are the wastewater and drinking plants. We transfer them to the entity, with the loans associated being credited back to our council. The analysis that there's been a series of analyses done by DIA and contributing staff indicate that there'd be no council worse off by entering an entity, that there are savings by way of two ways. In the short term, the savings are by way of being able to fund those loans over a much longer time period at potentially low interest rates. And the long term, by efficiencies, long term and medium term, by efficiencies gained by the scale of organisations. Those efficiencies claimed to be in the sort of 10 to 30, 35% range, depending on who you're talking to. Just before I go to Councillor Dalgety, is there anything I'm saying that is incorrect there?
No, through the chair, no. We had, if we stayed as in-house, the funding model wouldn't change, but we wouldn't get those efficiencies.
Yep. Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Dalgety. For those online, I would absolutely like to point out that Councillor Dalgety is in a vehicle. However, she is not the driver of the said vehicle. Thank you, Councillor Dalgety.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm now parked. I just wanted to allude to the efficiencies of scale, and that Whanganui is looking at around the 31,000 connections, and the wider Horizons group is looking at 58,000 connections. So there is more favourable rates with the greater scale given of the wider group.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments around finance rules or pricing, etc.? Moving to item number 13, the strategic risks.
Quite to cover everything in the paper, your worship. I don't think there's anything extra we can add to that one.
Any further questions, comments there, councillors? We're getting very near decision-making times. Moving to Councillor Loudon.
I couldn't attend the Palmerston North Horowhenua meeting. Can you just confirm for me Palmerston North City's position as far as there was an understanding before I left that they weren't in a good position, but I gather their position is much stronger now than what was envisaged.
Yeah, as I understand it, and I'll preface that. So initially there was a huge concern about having a relationship with Palmerston North City. They had a need for a massive wastewater investment that, depending on the reports at early stages, somewhere around 800 million plus. And several things have changed. First of all, under Te Mata Arawai, the new standards, which allow for a probable discharge back to waterways rather than land, softens that need, or that will be a process that they go through. But their estimates now are substantially lower. It was interesting that the comments Internal Affairs have made to us to say, actually, of the region's councils, Palmerston's not in bad shape. And they were very positive. They were strongly saying, maybe in a better shape than they actually think. And a lot of that is about population. Moving to the next one, but a good question because it's important. People will be concerned, but those analyses have been done. Moving to 14, the decision-making process. I'd just like to sort of correct 14.5, and again, I stress a lot of this paper was driven prior to the last 10 days of meetings. Council's decisions will need to take account of the decisions to be made by Whanganui and Ruapehu district councils. I would put on top of that 4 other councils, which would include a Horowhenua, Palmerston North City, etc. Anything further from staff around 14?
I might help to note, Worship, that as far as I understand, and I think Mr. Hodder can confirm, the Whanganui Council now contemplates making a final decision on this matter in early July. Ruapehu District Council, I think from memory, is on the 25th of June, or certainly later next month. And Palmerston North is on the 4th of June, is what we understand. I'm not sure about Horowhenua, I'm sorry.
It's the same day.
And Horowhenua on the same day, thank you.
It's not appropriate for us to speculate on what their decisions would be. But certainly Whanganui will be an interesting decision as to how that sits. Right. We're now entering into the area of recommendations. Some of these will be straightforward, I think. Recommendation 1, could I have somebody move and second we receive the report? Councillor Carter, Councillor Sharlin. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. And I'll stress that with regard to these recommendations, I'm going to set aside standing orders. You have the right to speak, and right to speak preferably once. Recommendation 2, that we receive the submissions. Would some councillor Take it to order. Councillor Wilson, those in favour? Those against? Carried. That's 1 and 2 done. Gets trickier later. Recommendation 3, that Rangitukia District Council notes that Ruapehu and Whanganui District Councils have consulted with their communities on the same model of water services. That is factual. Would somebody like to, Councillor Wilson moving, Councillor Carter seconding, those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. I will move recommendation 4 and the change of order to be after recommendation 7. Recommendation 5, that Rangitukia District Council, sorry.
No, sorry. No, you. Is she? Okay, that's right. I
I'm
thought
just
she
moving,
overrode
changing
it.
the order,
Yeah, she
not
overrode
moving it, sorry.
Yeah.
An appropriate choice of words.
Yes.
Recommendation 5, that Rangitukia District Council notes that A, the considerable divergence of views expressed by submitters to the consultation. B, the majority preference for the establishment of a joint water services council controlled with Ruapehu and Whanganui just rather than continuing to provide water services directly. That was the status factual of that. You are so moving, Councillor Wilson.
Happy to move is correct, yeah.
Councillor Hero seconding. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. Recommendation 6, that Rangitukia District Council resolves to continue discussions with the district, iwi and Hapu, in collaboration with their regional councils, how best to combine iwi and Hapu responsibilities, etc. Would somebody like to so move that? Councillor Okawa, appropriate for you. Councillor Hero, do you wish to second that? Aye. But we need to engage here.
Yes.
It's a requirement. Those in favour? Those against? Carry. Thank you. Now we come to the crunch. Recommendation 7, that having regard to section 61 and 62 of the Local Government Water Service Preliminary Arrangements Act 2024, Rangitukia District Council A agrees to continue working with Ruapehu Whanganui District Councils in establishing an entity. B agrees to continue discussions with Palmerston North City and Horowhenua District Council about establishing an entity with them and other councils. And then C, either council has a preferred position to work with Ruapehu and Whanganui District Councils to establish the entity, or council has a preferred position to work with Palmerston North City, Horowhenua, Ruapehu and Whanganui District Councils to establish a wider entity. And D, notes the continual work in preparing a joint water services plan containing an implementation plans for the entity to the Secretary of Local Government on or before the date, 3rd of September, and resolves that the shareholding councils for the joint entity invite the participation of our iwi and Hapu and design process to the extent that legislation allows. Now, it has been suggested by staff, and something that I consider appropriate. Recommendation 7C, either council has a preferred position to work with Ruapehu and Whanganui District Councils to establish an entity, subject to Whanganui and Ruapehu confirming for each by council resolution that they intend to join that entity with Rangitukia, or council has a preferred position to work with Palmerston North City, Horowhenua, Ruapehu and Whanganui District Councils to establish the entity. And here is the catch, subject to meeting the government's requirements for financial sustainability. Second bullet point, delivering savings compared with the in-house model for the Rangitukia. And thirdly, Palmerston North and Horowhenua confirming by each council resolution that they intend to join the entity with us.
So
Can we make sure that those are up on the board? So there are slight changes to,
It's just to give us more clarity.
so in other words,
To see.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
so a slight alteration to effectively saying we will join up with people subject to them wanting to join with us. Each council would have, each entity has to be financially sustainable. That's a given. And questions first, or sorry, staff, do you wish to make any comments first before I go to questions?
I suppose that's my earlier comment around, ensuring that we can have a trusting relationship with who we work with and who you choose us to work with. And also, an option that gives us certainty would really be what we are seeking today.
Councillor Hero.
So thank you for that clarification around that trusting relationship. My question is, do we have those trusting relationships with all of those councils involved?
Certainly from a governance point of view, and I'll let the chief executive talk from a relationship entity within the operational sense. From a governance perspective, we have very good understandings with Horowhenua and Palms North. We have good relationships with Wanganui and Ruapehu. They don't concern me at all. You can't say that there are favourites one way or the other, really. Those relationships extend beyond water services entity. We've been part of regional councils together. We're part of a civil defence forever and a day. But this legislation is beyond personal relationships now. What we are looking at is a position 10, 20, 30, 40 years out. And that's where our focus has to be. But I can tell you there are no problems from a governance arm. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Bishop. I think we have all learned a lot in the last couple of months, and we have built good relationships right across the district. And from those good relationships has been an offer from Palmerston and Horowhenua to look at a wider model. And I think, to his worship's point, everybody is now taking not a short-term look, but a longer-term look at it. And it may have been driven initially by some personalities, but I think we've worked through that. And now we're looking at, okay, what is best for our communities, what's best for our districts, and what's best for us together. And I feel like we've come a long way in that short period to actually be able to work together to have some open and honest conversations. That's brought us this other option today.
Thank you.
Councillor O'Carroll.
Yes, so based on all the meetings, again, we've had lots of meetings, and the information that's been given, staff's work, the understanding and learning about scales of efficiencies. But based on that, and I have this all written out, because we only get one say. Well, I'm going to have my one say, and that's it. I'll leave it for everyone else. Recommendation 7, based on Wanganui waiting till July, it may be that we only have Ruapehu, which to me is not a good position for us to be left in. So for me, I would say go with the recommendation. I would go with A, B, and in that C, the either or, because it's changed. I would prefer the position for us to work with the wider, is that the top one now? The wider group. So the Palmerston North Palmerston North, Horowhenua, Ruapehu, Wanganui District Councils to establish our CCO and meet and D and C. So that would be my preference.
Are you saying that you wish to move that?
Oh. Okay, yes. Do I have a second?
I'll take that as a motion, but I'll take further and look for a seconder to that. Councillor Wilson seconding, but I'll continue first before you speak further to the motion. To take any questions first, Councillor Wong.
And taking that position that we prioritise the wider council position, how do you personally see it? Because I believe that you have had more experience in dealing with these councils at a number of different levels, in jeopardising any relationship with the narrower one in the Rangitiki Whanganui Ruapehu one. If there's any risk of injury to that, I would be interested to know. So I'd be more caution otherwise on the sport.
It's a fair question. I think that Whanganui would have preferred to have a relationship purely with Ruapehu and ourselves. But they've been invited and attended the meeting, for instance, with Palmerston North and Horowhenua. So they haven't ruled themselves out of that discussion at all. And unfortunately, they're in the position now of not being able to confirm a position until very late July, very early July. Sorry, but it is a fair point. And I will certainly, when I go turn to speak, I'll be speaking in favour of the motion. Councillor Herald.
So just so that I've got this clear in my head, everything A, B, C, D, E. So everything has got to be agreed upon in this recommendation. Can I just get clarity on that? So
yes, you'd need to agree to A, B, A and B.
Yes.
And an option within C.
Yep.
And D and E become part of it as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Loudon, question? Yeah.
In the recent discussions with Palmerston North and Horowhenua, did they indicate why they've decided to broaden their horizons to offer interest with us? Not courted.
Yeah. There's certainly Horowhenua were faced with some decisions around, first of all, whether they went with Wellington, Greater Wellington, in association with Kapiti. They considered that and decided that wasn't a viable option for them, as I understand it. They could have formed a relationship with Kapiti, but also felt as though Kapiti may elect to go it alone. They have relationships with Palmerston North and ourselves as commonplace. We're often at the table together. They are in a relatively strong position, but they are challenged by growth. And they see the feedback that I get from their mayor and chief executive is, one, this is a long-term position, and that there are certainly advantages and efficiencies of scale. Any further questions? Councillor Wong.
Could I just comment further on perhaps that answer?
Yeah.
On that question. I have attended the meetings from the start when we were at Palmerston North, and I believe Mayor Grant has always been looking for a wider grouping of, and from what I have surmised from his view was that he would like a horizons wide grouping, and I guess he's been working away, and this is what has been boiled down to, because with Mineral 2 having pulled out, this is what's being left, and this is as wide as he can get. So this has probably been his second choice plan after not achieving the horizons wide, but he's been very consistent with that message, always been promoting a wider grouping. Hence why it's not coming to us now, but this is the result of what he has been left with. That's how I see it. So it come at a late time because the other ones that he was working on didn't seem to work. That's how I see his view. So I believe that's where we are now from that. Councillor Moore.
They are effectively waiting on our decision, by the way. I'm meant to be on a phone call with them at 3 o'clock. Questions? Did you have Councillor Charles and Councillor Wilson? Then I'll move to the speaker, to the mover of the speaker.
It's one question. If we carry on deliberations with Palmerston North and Horowhenua and Wanganui make a decision in July and then want to join us, is that going to muck it all up, or is it?
No, it wouldn't. It won't be. But they'd just be an addition to.
Yeah.
They've been invited to the same process.
Okay.
Councillor Wilson.
Appreciate your desire to push on with this one, Your Worship, but just A and B just doesn't quite sit right with me, and I'd like to test it for you and bring it to for your consideration. If you look at A in this recommendation, agree to continue working with Ruapehu Wanganui District Council establishing a water CCO, and then B agrees to continue discussions with Palmerston North Horowhenua District Council. And then you've also got that picked up further down the line. To me, it's a little bit, I don't know if it's disingenuous or if it's just trying to sit on the fence and we're not sending a strong message here. As our position, it's our position that should count.
Perhaps if with the mover's approval, A could read agrees to continue discussions.
Yeah. Just wondering.
Because we will continue to have discussions with them. Because subject to the vote of Horowhenua and Palmerston, for instance, if they said at the table, because this has been driven by relationships, mayors, chief executives, it is decided on by vote at council tables. So we need to continue those discussions. Would the mover be happy with that?
Yes.
Does that satisfy you?
Thank you. Yeah.
Councillor Dalgety.
I've just got some comments to make, if that's okay.
Certainly.
So yeah, as we've all concluded, we're too small to go it alone and don't have the capacity or the capability, especially given that we were until recently in a shared service agreement with Manawatu. I acknowledge that we have significant Three Waters CapEx spend required in the short to medium term. Price harmonisation now looks unlikely in the short term. However, it meant we were an early benefactor and is significant and offered significant relief for our ratepayers. I hope price harmonisation is negotiated in the long term. I feel we are between a rock and a hard place. We can't choose who is in our sandpit. This is about who wants us in theirs. We've been told from day dot, scale will enable efficiencies. The status quo is not an option and is likely unaffordable. However, we need to ensure a strong local voice and that each council, despite their size, retains a vote and no one is worse off. Finally, I think there will be other future benefits via arrangements and greater collaboration. My preference.
I think, Councillor, you're actually speaking to the motion here. Rather than a question. I take on board your sentiments. But I'm just wondering if you could just reserve some of those comments and pass them on as a speaker to the motion.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
That's fine.
Where's what she was saying? Sorry.
I'll go. Is that a question? What's your question, councillor Carter?
One or two is not mentioned up there, but it could be a factor of our equation.
They've made a decision to go in-house.
But maybe the government has different ideas of water
It's out
services.
of our control. They've already resolved their
Okay, so
decision.
there, if they get told to come and join us, that's on them, it's nothing to do with.
That's right.
Yeah, if they got told to come with us, that's a government direction. We have no control over that. Councillor Okawa, as mover of the motion, you wish to speak to it?
Well, I thought I had, but again, I just want to reiterate the reasoning on why I chose that preferred option. Again, based on the dance, but based on Wanganui. And I just think that long term for us, our thinking about our long-term position 30 years down the line. And I know we said at the beginning, we preferred, our preference around this table was the three waters, was Wanganui, Ruapehu and us. And now knowing what we know now, the information that we've had to hand, it has led me to believe in this recommendation and the advantages in having these efficiencies and this preference. Kia ora.
Thank you. I'll go straight to you, councillor Dalgety, so you can continue. Sorry.
Sorry, I was worried I was going to lose my opportunity. But yes, I will finish those sentiments by saying my preference is to work with the Wider Horizons group.
Thank you. Which way do I work my way around the table? Maybe because councillor Loudon next.
I speak for the motion. I think the more connections we can offer should improve economics. I do feel as though we need to view this as a wider district, and I see potential growth within the wider district that will enhance the economics down the track.
Councillor Carter.
Total agreement with where Councillor Loudon's come from. More people in the sandpit, the better off we are, I feel.
Go to councillor Lambert before councillor Bourne. Councillor Lambert.
Right, yes, no, wholeheartedly agree with this decision. All the information I've received, bigger certainly is better. Huge fan of going down this line. And I really honestly think in 30 years' time, we will be remembered. This will be remembered as one of the better decisions.
Councillor Moore.
Yeah, I'm speaking for the motion, although I'm not as enthusiastic as Councillor Lambert, being cemented in history. And I'm also a little bit not as big a fan as economies of scale as some people are, so there's good and bad about everything. And yeah, sometimes economies of scale don't deliver. I hope this one does, but yeah, speaking for the motion.
Councillor Wilson.
It's certainly a second to your worship, speaking for the motion. I would just like to say, as far as an order paper concerned, it is a matter and the work that's been involved here. I've probably reviewed this order paper and referenced back to the number of meetings that we've done, more time than I have in my 3 terms on council on any other matter. What is pleasing from the submission point of view is that all of the issues that were raised by submitters, I feel can be addressed with regards to price harmonisation, costs. They can be addressed by this decision as a secondary stage to once we've made this decision. And that allows the people to have their voice and concern around, voice and how we get represented. We can't do any of that until we get this decision across the line. I think this one best represents it, so speaking in favour.
Right, total support.
Councillor Charlotte.
Totally agree, because we just can't take the risk of working just with Wanganui and Ruapehu and finding ourselves out in the cold if that was to happen.
Councillor Wong.
I support this. I think also this is possibly an opportunity for us to show some leadership in this whole grouping and make a bold that we put our necks out to support the wider grouping. And hopefully some of the other councils can perhaps make a decision because they follow our boldness.
I totally support this. And if Wanganui and Ruapehu wish to join that, I would welcome that. It's been a huge amount of work to get to this stage. That the number of discussions at mayoral and chief executive level, council level, but those discussions are going to ramp up further. Literally, this is just the start. Go to you. Do you need a right of reply with everybody speaking in favour?
No, absolutely. Thank you, Mandy. Thanks, everyone.
Then I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour?
Right.
Those against? Carried. Can we record that as a unanimous decision, please? Congratulations, guys. That's probably the most significant decision I have seen ever in the time that I've been in council. However, it's not finished yet. We've still got a little bit further to go. Whether we need recommendation 4 or not, from the chair's perspective, I think that becomes redundant. So we'll remove recommendation 4. Recommendation 9, that council resolves to accept the expert technical advice and the intentions, etc.
Recommendation 8.
Sorry, recommendation 8 I've skipped. That Rangitikei District Council notes the Parliament's Finance and Expenditure Committee is not due to report until 17th of June with enactment in August and September, which means the outcome of the council's submission will not be known until then, i.e. after and it's just noting a fact. Also move, looking Councillor Wilson seconding. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. Recommendation 9, that Rangitikei District Council resolves to accept expert technical advice that the intention behind clause 10 in the local government bill prohibiting transport corridor stormwater infrastructure from being transferred outside the council's direct control is confined to a very small number of assets and does not materially affect the ability for the council to transfer stormwater assets to the entity, and that council resolves to do this. I will recommend that we table this.
On the table.
Sorry?
Leave it to lie on the table.
Yeah, that we leave this to lie on the table. Looking for a second or another recommendation. Are you prepared to second?
Second, leaving on the table subject to the information we've heard earlier today.
And speaking to this, I have asked staff whether that makes any material difference at this stage, and the answer was no. I think there's enough complexity there and further investigative work that has to go on in this space. I don't think any of the councils fully understand this, and by leaving it lie on the table, we may get further clarity around this. Speaking to a motion. Any other speakers? No, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Thank you. Recommendation 10, that Rangitikei District Council notes the advantages and disadvantages of of transferring the 3 mixed-use rural water supply schemes, Erawan, Hunterville and Omatane, to the Water Services Controlled Organisation, and the outcome of discussions with the chairs of these 3 schemes, and resolves to not include these schemes in the list of water assets to be transferred to the entity, and to signal council's intention for a discussion about a service agreement with the entity board within the first 2 years of its establishment for any scheme which requests this. Take any, or you were great.
I'm going to separate.
He's got anything.
Who's got, do we have councillor Dalgety, are you wishing to second?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
you
please.
have, there's a split voice. Councillor Morn, you're moving it?
Yes,
Do you wish to speak to
I
this?
do. This just reflects the feeling of well, particularly the Erewhon and the Hunterville water schemes. There's so much not clarity around how they should operate. They just want certainty. They seem happy with the way they're running at the moment, working with council and the way it's coming together. So I think this would be a good result if it can be kept out of local water done well. So, yeah.
Any further speakers? I'll speak to this, totally in favour. We've had so many meetings with these schemes. They run really independently. They are council owned and that's their status. They've been very clear in wanting to remain with council, with council being prepared to be the sort of advisory administrative role. But they set their own futures. They set their own pricing. Any other speakers? Councillor Wong.
Question. So if the assets of the rural water schemes isn't transferred to the CCO, I guess it's retained with the council. So how does that sit in the future if these water schemes contract their maintenance to someone else? Do we still hold, or do we transfer ownership to these water schemes as a trust?
Does staff want to illustrate and speak to this, brother?
Yeah, it's, thank you, Worship. Thanks for the question. The situation, I think, as I understood the question is, can the maintenance and service arrangements be contracted out? The answer is yes. Anything could be done there. Could, for example, use the new entity or the CCO to do that work by a contracted arrangement. In terms of the ownership of the assets, if it's remained as an asset on council's register as a water asset, then it'll be subject to the provisions of the Act yet to be passed. And it may mean, for example, that council is still considered a water organisation in that respect and may have and probably will have some obligations in respect of, for example, developing a water service strategy and so on. But obviously the effort will be commensurate with the smaller scale of those assets compared to the bigger networks. What was the other point? Can I?
Through the chair, we will still be ring fenced for that area
And it would have to be
and
ring-fenced.
subject to Commerce Commission close eye on what we're doing.
Just if I may, Your Worship, one thing to add, it adds a lot of additional complexity. So if you think of CapEx renewals and upgrades that an entity might require, but where does the funding for that fall? How do you, there's a lot of added complexity if you choose that model. If it's all up to the entity and they can borrow and they can organize their renewals and upgrades and whatever they want to do, it is much simpler.
Yeah. Just an answer to that. Now, we've been given fairly clear direction by these entities, and we are absolutely expecting more legislation and clarification with regard to this. And sorry, any other speakers? Right, a reply.
Yeah, I guess it's not going to be easy, but I believe we need to do this. And also, we've got this mixed use supply. They will have to be aware and comply with the water standards that are in place as a scheme, but they're aware of that as well.
I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Before I close off, staff, is there anything else you wish to highlight? Anything that I've missed?
If I may, Your Worship, just make a comment. I would just like to thank and credit both Ruipeu and Wanganui councils from an officer perspective. The way we work together, the amount of information they were prepared to share, the whole arrangement, a lot of credit to them and all the staff that was part of that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Declare the meeting closed.